Hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's James Gailliard, live Choice 92.1 FM, the People Station. You might be checking us out online on Facebook, YouTube, or listening to us on In Black and White, my podcast. Listen, one of the things I committed to y'all is that I would bring you movers, shakers, thought leaders, people that care about the people, and true to my promise and word in studio. We got studio full. This is a record today. We've never had 5 people in the studio before, but I have with me, and I'm going to start off with him, let him introduce his posse. But a member of the board of directors of the Black Church PAC, you may not be familiar with them, but they are doing mad work on the ground here in North Carolina, which is why they're in Rocky Mount. And so, Pastor Mike, you are in the space. Black Church PAC, welcome, brother.
Man, I'm telling you, Gilliard, it's great to meet you. Just imagine, we only known each other for about a month. Can you imagine we known each other for a year?
Man, it's crazy.
Shake up the world. Yeah, it's great to be here in Rocky Mount. I've never been to Rocky Mount. I went to be here and my people's actually from Red Springs.
East,
Rocky
Southeast.
Mount, yeah, Southeast. So great to be in a city I've never been in. I'll just introduce the homies real quick. Sitting to my left, one of the co-founders of Until Freedom, Angelo Pinto Esquire.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
With the emphasis on the Esquire.
Indeed.
Legal mind.
Thank you.
All right. D1, world-renowned hip-hop activist, rapper, disciple maker, my man, D1.
That's accurate.
Yeah, right? And the great Boycott Black Murder founder and co-founder Until Freedom, artist, activist, soldier, freedom fighter, the great my son.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So let's start, man. People are probably not familiar with Black Church PAC. Tell us about how you got started, what do you do, and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, Black Church PAC started in 2017. It emerged literally in the aftermath of the victory of Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton for the presidency of the United States. A number of Black church faith leaders like Bishop Leah Daughtry, Pastor Jamal Bryant, Erica Campbell, Warren Campbell, Otis Moss III, Bishop Frank Reed, so many others. We felt that the Black church didn't have the updated political infrastructure needed to activate the relational networks of the institutional Black church. All of us were part of various different reformations or denominations or subgroups of, say, the Christian tradition. But the Black church, as we know, is an institutional body. It is almost Black people's ark that emerged out of antebellum slavery. It was the only place where we could learn to read. Right. We could pray how we wanted to pray, away from the gaze of the white slave master, our businesses, our colleges. The Black church, as the soil of Black liberation, has persisted long before the creation of any denomination. And so because the 1970s political leadership passed the Johnson Amendment, which actually made it illegal for 501c3s to actually be engaged in political activism as a response to the SCLC, right? They passed this law in the 1970s. It effectively muted Black churches from being able to weigh in without fear of the IRS reprisal. And so we felt like with Donald Trump and just the kind of neglect of the Democratic Party generally, the Black church needed to have our own container, a political container for individuals, not denominations, but individuals, not even churches, but individuals who may be pastors, who may be missionaries, who may be artists, who may be parishioners, who may be whoever, that want to speak using the institutional history and memory of the Black church to weigh in on what we at the time were identifying rightly existential threat to Black life and in general the political well-being of this country. And so the Black Church PAC has existed since 2017. We are in our 7th, 8th year, multi-million-dollar political action committee. We've invested millions of dollars on the ground in certain particular political races to make sure we are electing elected officials who care about ending gun violence, ending mass incarceration, securing universal health care, securing reparations, making sure that we have economic justice. All these issues are the kind of bread and butter issues of the Black Church PAC, and it's been a blessing as we've gone along. People are finding out more and more about us. Now we got a outpost here in Rocky Mount.
Yes, sir. We are, and we're here for it, man. I really appreciate the work. For those of you that don't know, when we wrote the faith plan, engagement plan for North Carolina with a heavy focus on Eastern North Carolina, the very, very first organization to step up to send some money was a Black Church PAC. And I would say, even though I know we had the strategy and the infrastructure, without the finances and the other resources, we would not be doing the work we're doing. So just shout out to you, Black Church PAC. And listen, for me, Pastor Mike, it is like I'm really interested. Yeah, there's an outcome I'm looking for in November, in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But I'm also equally, if not more, interested in long-term infrastructure so that we're not running candidate motivated processes. You know, where we're just putting something in place where regardless of who the candidate is, they're coming to us. Saying, hey, we need y'all to get this vote across for X reason. But then we, you know, I told my folk we're gonna take off the week after Tuesday. I see y'all. I'll be in the pulpit on Sunday. Y'all won't see y'all the rest of that week. But then when Monday hits,
it's go time.
Yeah, man, we gotta go.
And that's the point of the Black Church PAC as well. So obviously elections are important. We also have a 501c4 that we call the Black Church Action Fund / Black Church Freedom Fund, so we can keep engaging in a very kind of explicit political way around the issues that are a part of the agenda, should be, or we make it a part of the agenda of any candidate. I just think it's super, super important, to your point, that this is not an extension of the Democratic Party. It's not an extension of the Republican Party. This is self-determination. This is building Black political independence using the hundreds of years of relational power of Black churches, Black people, and Black church creations, right? And so absolutely it's critical for us to acknowledge that the lack of the infrastructure keeps us under the thumb of people who don't always have our best interests in mind.
Absolutely.
And so we needed the infrastructure to raise the money, to receive the money, so we can activate folks. If I told you that every election cycle, $2 billion with a B is raised and spent on an election cycle, and less than 6% of that is spent with Black people, Latino people, less than, not just Black people, any non-white person, less than 6%. So it's because we don't have this infrastructure. And that's what these folks will tell you. Well, I can't give to 501c3, so I can't give it to you. Well, you a liar, and you serve the father of lies.
That's right.
And I can recognize a liar when I see one, and I'm glad to call you one if you are one. And so now we have the infrastructure, and now they can't use that. So it's not just for elections, but it's also for beyond. And that's part of why we have this kind of collaboration going with activists, with artists, right? Because we all want to weigh in. We want to make sure people hear the importance of civic participation, but voting is either the invitation into the process or it's an extension of your already engagement in the process. But it's never the end. Right? Voting is never the end.
That's right.
And anyone who would make you think that is, again, trying to control you in a different kind of way. And we free Black people.
That's
right.
We
free people. We free followers of Jesus.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's good stuff, man. So let me shift gears, because I don't want to sound ignorant, but I just didn't know. Like, I had not heard of Until Freedom until 2 hours ago.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit. You might slide that mic, but tell us a little bit about Until Freedom, man.
So Until Freedom is interesting. What Pastor Mike is talking about, this history, hundreds of years history of the Black church. And Until Freedom, we really created ourselves thinking about the institutional history of legacy organizations. So Until Freedom was created in 2019, and we know that 1619 something significant happened for Black folks in this country. It was the first slave ships that came to America. And we said in 2019, thinking about the 400 years of organizing that had happened for Black folks, what did we want the next 400 years to look like? What would an organization look like today that really speaks to the needs, the interests, and issues of Black folks? And Until Freedom was created in that sense, also knowing what Pastor Mike said, that oftentimes our organizations that really serve our interests are not funded. They're not supported.
Right.
People aren't interested in using them. So we got out there and did the work without any money. Whatever money we had in our pocket, we hit the streets. We started in Mississippi. There was a prison called Parchment Prison where individuals were literally dying. And we started there first. And if you know anything about Parchment prison, they used to say this was one of the first convict leasing systems that was built after slavery. And they talked about Parchment Prison and the convict leasing system as worse than slavery. People often talk about the institution of slavery and how bad it was, but the institutions that followed it were just as bad.
Yeah.
And if you know the history of it, you'll know that. After that, we went to Louisville, Kentucky, where a woman was killed by police. We were on the ground for a couple of weeks. Not too many people heard about the case or were interested in it, but we went on the ground because we were called and summoned to be there. On our second trip, when we were leaving, we were heading to meet another family in Indianapolis who was also a young man who was killed by police. We saw a video on our phones, and we said we need to go to the place that this video, wherever this is taking place. We found out that the video was taking place in Minneapolis. It happened to be the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. We couldn't get any flights. We drove 10 hours to Minneapolis. We said we were going to stay there for a day. We ended up staying there for about a week. And as a result, our lives and the movement changed. And that case we were in Louisville for was Breonna Taylor. And as a result of us going to Minneapolis, we were also to raise a tremendous amount of visibility for Breonna Taylor's case. So we're an organization that does that kind of work. We're on the ground for the issues. We often say our theory of change is protest, politics, and policy.
Okay.
Right? So we understand that these things are interconnected.
Right.
People often say you're protesting, but how is it connected to politics? How is it connected to policy? And for us, our theory of change sees all those things interchanged and interconnected.
And listen, that's the history of change,
Yes,
in our
indeed.
nation. While you have some people out in the streets, you had other people behind closed doors negotiating, having conversations. So I do want to shift because I want to get to D. But then I want to make sure I want the rest of the show. I want to direct it at black men because we got 5 black men sitting in this room, and it really flies in the face of the narrative of black men not being engaged, black men not caring about the process. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. But my associate pastor, or one of my staff pastors, she was like, "Pastor, you got D here? You ain't tell me. I was just listening to his music, She said, I need an alternative for my kids because her kids are teenagers. And I need something for them to listen to, and they listen to your music. So, man, tell us about you, man, and your music and what you do and how you got connected with all this.
Yeah, it's very simple. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. Born David Augustine Jr., you know what I mean? Just raised on the east side, Ninth Ward of New Orleans. And searching for my purpose in life wasn't really something I was concerned with because we aren't taught as kids to search for our purpose. We taught to search for where the paper is, where the bread is, where the cash at. So growing up, I wanted to be whatever I thought was going to get me the bag. So an engineer, a lawyer, an NBA player, you heard me, all this type of stuff. At one time, ironically, now that I think about it, full circle moment, I wanted to be the president of the United States for a season in time. I had a 4th grade teacher, and I don't even want to make her famous now, because by me being a public figure, I don't even want to make her famous with my platform. But she told me that I wasn't smart enough to be the president and that I didn't have what it took. So I was just on this hunt all throughout my childhood for a sense of validation that I also thought would lead to monetization as well, Okay. And ain't nothing wrong with wanting to feel good about yourself while you're able to make some money,
That's
know.
Right.
And when I got to college, thankfully, I had an encounter. I grew up Catholic, right? Okay. Black Catholics, that's a huge thing in New Orleans. I think we lead the nation in black Catholics, you heard me? Everybody I know mostly is Catholic in New Orleans. I grew up Catholic. And I grew up going to church, but it wasn't until I got to college that I realized I had knowledge of who God was, but I didn't have a relationship with God at all. You know what I mean? So church was something that you go do for 45 minutes every Sunday to check off that box and feel like you're a good person. Yeah. And you home in time for the Saints game. You know what I mean? The 12 noon kickoff time.
There were some rough games.
Yeah.
No, actually not. That was Drew Brees' year, son.
No, my childhood wasn't Drew Brees. My childhood was that.
The 49ers beating up on the Saints.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Them games.
Yeah, the Steve Young years.
Steve Young was a beast.
I remember them games.
So man, I got to college, and honestly, I had a very rough freshman year, all in one, in one swoop. In my freshman year, my best friend in New Orleans got murdered. My girlfriend, who I've been with for 3 years, we went to college together. She ended up cheating on me with a few football players. You heard me? Broke my heart.
This a rough year, D.
Yeah. I got cut from LSU's basketball team. And then my roommate started selling dope. And he was one of my best friends from high school. Got to college, totally reinvented himself, and all this stuff happened. And man, I could have found a lot of things at that time. And I actually, for a little brief time, I dibbled and dabbled in some different ways that definitely would have ended real bad for me. But ultimately, through that tumultuous 12 months, man, I found Jesus. You heard me? And I found a real authentic relationship with God that just, it made everything make sense to me. And I'm a logical thinking person, you know, so it made sense as to like, oh, I get why we were created now and we were put here and given these talents and these gifts to utilize them, but not utilize them for street cred, not utilize them, you know, just to see what's going to make you the most money. Use your gifts and talents to make this world a better place and make your creator proud of why he created you and blessed you with those things. So it all made sense to me. So now the things I naturally loved, like rapping and like being a person that could pour into the lives of others, that clicked to me to where it was like, oh, I get it. Let me just use music in a way that's gonna make God proud or make this world a better place. Let me use the fact that I like pouring into younger kids to fool around and be a teacher, you know? So I became a middle school teacher, / rapper, and fresh out of college, I'm the dude running around Louisiana that they like, man, he be in the clubs with everybody else, but his music is different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he a real teacher by daytime, you know what I mean? So then 2 years after that, my music career really took off on a national level, and since 2009, literally, I've been out here full time, traveling this world, being a man of God that got the gift of gab, you heard me, and could spit with the best of them, but has a heart that's meant to, you know, make this world better. And I call it, you know, mission vision. That's my whole movement, is having a mission and having the vision to carry that mission out. So man, I'm here.
That's so good, man. Listen, for those of you just tuning in, it's James Gailliard, live on James Gailliard Show, Choice 92.1 FM, or in black and white. It's People's Station. Appreciate you all here. We're going to check your comments out post-show. I got a studio full, and we're about to shift gears to the conversation. And I want to have a real honest, heart-to-heart conversation about black men and black men in the electorate and black men in voting. So I want to know, honestly, what say y'all? Like, so much data suggests black men just don't care about voting. Black men are going to jump on Trump's bandwagon. Black men this, black men that. We're all black men. Pastor Mike, I'm going to start with you. Well, what say you?
I'm going to be Magic Johnson and pass it to my son, because we actually have had conversations about this very topic for going on, 4-5 months?
Yep, about 4 or 5 months.
Because, you know, our work beyond elections is actually working directly with young black men, trying to keep them alive,
Gotcha.
trying to keep them free from either interpersonal violence, police violence, or just the I call it the kind of recklessness of youth, right? Every other group of human beings, it seems like, in the world can be reckless in their youth and it not be a disqualifying factor for their life or their possibility. But black boys, you know, you got to almost be an angel just to have a chance for success, right?
That's right.
And I think that is part and parcel of what we have to elevate if we're going to have a real conversation about what's at stake. Yes, black men have a unique experience, but we are not as absent as people love to describe us to be in daily life. And me, my son, Angelo, we've been doing this thing called the Black Power Social Hour, Black Church Masterclass, and we've been talking about this. So love to bring my son in from Boycott Black Murder just to jump in here, because obviously it's a topic that's everybody seems to be making money off today, but don't want to share that money with a black man.
Well, let's do it.
And that's a fact. Thank you for inviting me into this conversation. You know, I'm a hip hop artist and activist. You know, and I have a strong history. I was signed to Violated Records, the late great Chris Lighty, who signed me in 1999. Unfortunately, I was incarcerated for a crime I didn't commit at the height of my music career when I was just starting to get, famous. And I spent 7 years in prison. And throughout that time, I wanted to come home and just transfer the message and transform the message that I was given, because unfortunately in our communities, we looked up to negativity. We glorified the drug dealer. We glorified all of the wrong things. And I wanted to come home and change that narrative because there was too many black and brown young boys incarcerated in those cells who had brought in to the false sense of reality that we were sold about what manhood looked like. So I came home with a different mission and a different understanding and changing that narrative, and then just being able to let them understand that manhood is not about what you can do and how you can harm someone. It's how you can better someone and change the narrative. So I have a real strong sense of what's going on, especially on the ground in the most adverse communities, and impoverished communities, in the mind state that they deal with. And what we're dealing with in this moment is there's a backlash because there's a certain demographic of black men that has feel forgotten. They don't see themselves represented in any political party, and therefore they're going against, it seems like this certain sector, because it's not most, this certain sector that they're speaking about, they're saying that they're not engaged. It seems like they're going against their best interest, but they want you to know that they're not being seen and they're not being heard. There is no vision of what, quote unquote, they say is a masculine black man inside the Democratic Party. We uplifted. Most of us want to see our women uplifted, but we want to see ourselves present in that party.
Representation.
So representation definitely matters. So I say that all the time. And when they look to a certain small demographic, when they see Donald Trump speak in a certain way, it seems as if he's speaking for them to a certain degree. And even though it sounds that it doesn't make sense, but they see some level of masculinity that they don't see in the Democratic Party. And we have to have these real conversations. Those are conversations that are real. They're not comfortable, but these are real conversations. Because I asked them, they were like, well, I don't want this. There are certain demographics of our community that feels like there is a feminine agenda being pushed upon men, right? Within the Democratic Party, that they feel like they're trying to legitimize and feminize men. This is a strong thing. They feel like they're pushing this agenda into our kids, and to a certain degree, I understand the narrative, but I tell them all the time, this is a small percentage, and we as strong men, we have to make sure that we're pushing, because the reality is there is going to be agendas, and everybody's going to speak for their agenda. But as black men, we have to be present, and we have to make sure that we're letting them know that this is what our agenda is. And when we look at this situation, and we look at these parties, right, we have to say, where do we have the best chance of succeeding, right? We can't go against our total best interest for one issue that we might not agree with, right? For one situation that we might not agree with.
But listen, I'm so on point with you, but two things jump out. First of all, I tell church, I go around the country helping people grow churches. And one of the things they say, how do you get so many men? how you get so many men in your church? And one of the things I say is, why are you feminizing your church? So you got a lavender painted sanctuary with flowers in the middle of the room, and you want brothers to pop up in there. So like, you walk through my church, ain't no flowers in the sanctuary. It's earth tones, and it's deliberate, because the sister don't mind sitting in the room with the earth tones.
Exactly.
But the brother, so we are kind of very deliberate. And I think you're spot on, because oftentimes I think the face of the party, I'm speaking of Democrats, oftentimes can be people that in no way at all does a masculized man identify with. And that's not an anti LGBTQ plus sentiment, because that's between you and your God, and I'm not trying to get in your bedroom with you, that's your business. But don't ask me to be your poster child for your lifestyle.
That's a fact.
And I think a lot of times we have some of that going on, and I think the challenge of the party oftentimes is, keep your far left stuff just quiet and out of the way. And then depending on who we get, I think we lose elections because we lift up issues too high.
Well, so I'll jump in, and I know they got to go hit Pitt County, so we can keep cooking. We see you on the ground.
Appreciate y'all. Yeah, man.
I mean, I'll say a couple things about that, right? Like, I'm not one of these brothers who feel like one has to be, love you, bro, one has to be at the expense of the other.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Like, I think that there are some brothers who ain't offended by lavender and flowers, right? I mean, there's a spectrum of masculinity, right? And often I think we are overly we're finding ourselves in an all or nothing situation. And so the question I have for the political movements, and dare I even say the church, is, how are we having conversations where people can feel at home wherever they are, right? Now, Bishop J.W. Macklin, Church of God in Christ Bishop, our very prolific, wonderful speaker, he says, the journey of 1,000 miles always starts with one step.
One step.
And so the question that is before us is, knowing the socialization, knowing the trauma, knowing the harm and the threats, both imminent and long term, that are before us as a people. How do we make the steps towards the ideal that we want, where everyone can feel at home, whether you are gay, straight, whether you are Christian, Muslim, whether you are rich or poor, whether you're educated, uneducated, whether you're Republican, Democrat? No one should be made to feel like their life is vulnerable because of however they describe themselves to be. The reality is, and this is what me, my son, Angelo, and others have been talking about, we are asking a segment of black men who are born and socialized in a predatory environment. They're socialized and born in spaces where they don't have the privilege to cultivate the softer side of their humanity.
Okay.
Right? Because if they do, they'll get their head knocked off. I grew up in Hunters Point in San Francisco. My whole family are musicians. During the crack cocaine era of the 1980s, we all played piano and violins and drums. And I remember the day my father told my mother, who was our music teacher, that, hey, the boys aren't going to be playing violins anymore. Now, I could have been the black, who's the most famous violinist, right?
Right.
We said, well, why? Because he can't be carrying a violin on the bus through the neighborhood. He'll never survive.
That's right.
Right? It was that is the environment that many black boys are raised in, and so we never get the opportunity to cultivate the side of our lives that puts us in spaces and places where we have more emotional flexibility. Why do I say all that? Because then it plays itself out in a political way, in a cultural way, in a religious way, whereby the only part of our life we can safely, quote unquote, or affirmingly demonstrate is the tougher side, the side that often relies on aggression for survival, for loudness to be heard, right? And then you put us in spaces with people who are threatened by our energy, our aggression, our loudness, and they say, well, you don't belong here. And so we now have, this is the first generation of black men, I believe, and we're going to do some research on this, who are fully disconnected from black institutions. And their disconnect from black institutions, whether it's churches, whether it's colleges, whether it's organizations, etc., means that they now are susceptible to voices that are often manufactured, that are targeting them with propaganda on social media, misinformation, disinformation, tickling, and dare I even say enhancing the kind of skepticism and also real critiques of the failure of both political systems, political parties, black institutions. And so I just say all that to say, while it may be so that black men are not as tuned in politically at the 90% rate of our sisters, let's remember the average, not average, a lot of black men are so disconnected from institutions, they don't have the opportunity to be plugged in. At least we know black women who are often the members of our community who are connected into the social services to receive housing, to receive the forms of public assistance. Their experience of these systems that they are often voting for on behalf of the family, they know when stuff gets cut because it gets cut with them. Right. Most black men, the only real meaningful first contact we have with the system is what? The police.
Yeah, that's right.
The police becomes the extension of the vote.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha. So, D, what you think, man? black men engagement in this process, and then I want to go around in the show and hear from y'all about what do you most want to say to voters in North Carolina?
I said it in the meeting that we had a little while ago that I think it's important for pastors, it's important for public figures, anyone who's trying to engage black men in this voting process to make sure that you articulate to people why it's important for them to vote. Because telling someone to do something without them understanding why they should do it, and you may think it's common sense, like you should understand why it's important for you to vote. But honestly, voting or not voting, many people don't see it as being directly connected to their day-to-day life. They see they see their environment, their neighborhood as like, yo, this isn't changing much regardless of who's in office. Therefore, voting doesn't matter much to me. So I think it's just important to articulate the why. And I think it's easier to articulate that why when you are a man or a woman of faith, because we do so much stuff because of a delayed gratification that we are looking for from our Heavenly Father. You know what I mean? Ultimately, we're looking towards heaven, and we're looking at this world even as just a temporary holding place for us to where our character matters. And, you know, the refining of your character is something that often goes unapplauded, but you do the right work and you want to have integrity simply because you know that that is something that will be pleasing to, you know, to the Lord. Yeah. So I think that for men, specifically our people, black men, when you start to speak to them about the sacrifices that were made so that we have the right to be able to vote, you know, that's important. When you speak about the reality of us being responsible citizens, since we are choosing to live in this country, you know, and just saying, well, it's better for us to not continue to be force-fed results that we didn't even have a hand in being able to help, you know, dictate. So I think that communication leads to unification, and what we're seeing is that communication is something that has to happen outside of just election season, so that way we don't always feel like it's a mad scramble, you know, 2 weeks before the election to try to make black men or another demographic feel the importance of voting. So two things can be true at once. While we need to communicate even when it's not election season, at the same time, right now, as we are recording this this here podcast, it is very important to not sit here and use these 2 weeks as the time to want to air out grievances that we have with the system or with each other, and black men versus black women, and we want retribution for this, and we got issues. Yo, those conversations are much longer than 2 week conversations.
Right.
We have something that is very urgent right now, and I think if we can communicate the urgency of this moment to black men, which I think is our challenge, to communicate the urgency of this moment to black men, to black women, to the black church, then we will see a bump and a positive spike in terms of registration and voter turnout, and that's what we need.
That's real good. Mike, I'm going to give you the last word, man. What do you most want to say to voters in North Carolina?
Well, I just got some data today that has me a little shook, and so I want to just drop it down on here. In eastern North Carolina, the black vote turnout in the districts 1, 3, and 7 right now is at 20%.
20%.
20%, meaning that 80,000 of 400,000 registered black voters have voted.
So there's still 320,000 sitting out there.
320,000.
That's
your
the whole
listeners,
race.
320,000 of your listeners.
Yes, sir.
Have not yet cast their vote. If you in the Charlotte area, 36,000 of 200,000 folks have voted. If you are in the RTP Triangle area, 25,000 of 125,000 have voted. If you're in Durham, 25,000 of 104,000 have voted. So, beloved, listening to this, all of us know 10 family members and friends. Send them a text right now and ask them, have you voted? Because North Carolina will decide who will be the president of the United States. North Carolina will decide whose administration we will be walking into to ask, demand, require a more just society.
Right.
North Carolina will decide if we'll have an open door to a black woman who has some roots and connection to the black church and to the black community versus a former president who has shown us that he's willing to use the office of the presidency for his own personal good and wage an insurrection if he does not get his way. Beloved, we must vote. We do not have to agree with every single issue of Kamala Harris or the Democratic Party in order for us to stop a fascist and an authoritarian from taking office. Yeah. It is almost as if you're asking yourself, should I let the wolf in because I don't like the bear? Listen, no. Let's do what we know is right. And if you don't know what's right, trust the legacy of your ancestors. Black people in this country have always had to make tough political choices. We've rarely had a political race where we've voted on the offense, right? It's always been a defensive vote.
Yeah.
I don't believe we're making a defensive vote this cycle. Okay. I think Kamala Harris, I know Kamala Harris. I'm from her city. I know her family. When I was beat up by the police in 2005, it was Kamala Harris's sister, who was a lawyer, along with Michelle Alexander, who helped a brother like me. Wow. A good old Pentecostal tongue-talking brother who got his head cracked by the police. These folk came alongside me as a 20-year-old and helped not only put me back together, but find my voice as a faith-driven social justice person. And so these folk are people that I know will give us an open door. Again, we may not agree on everything, but you don't agree with yourself half the time.
I know,
and you still love yourself. So go vote. That's my message to North Carolina. If you need information, you have a trusted brother, Pastor James Gailliard. We love this brother. We only met a month ago. We was at the White House, all of us mad, had 2 nickels to rub together. Like, is any money coming to help us get out the vote? Our friend, a mutual friend, Charles Jenkins, introduced us, and we've been rocking ever since. And we got friends now. I've considered you a brother and a friend.
Absolutely.
We'll be back to Rocky Mountain to the eastern side. My people from here, Goldsboro, North Carolina. So I'm coming home.
I love it, man. Listen, you've been listening to D1, Pastor Mike from Black Church Pack on James Gailliard Show. I need to pay some bills, y'all, so we're going to take a quick commercial break. I'll see you on the other side. Well, I hope that was informative and helpful. One of the things that I'm going to be doing often is I'm going to be bringing to you movers, shakers, thought leaders, influencers, maybe people that you don't normally have the opportunity to be introduced to. I think exposure is so key. It's so important. For those of you just joining, I'm James Gailliard, and you are watching or listening to the James Gailliard Show on Choice 92.1 FM, the People Station. And today, we featured some pre-recorded interviews with people that I think you want to know, people that I think you should be exposed to. And so what will be helpful to me as we wind out today's show is I want to ask you to do a couple things. First of all, I want to ask you to share this. I want to ask you to comment on it. And I want to ask you to make sure that you're following me on all of the media platforms, my Black and White podcast, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, I should say, LinkedIn, all of the places. And so I want you to follow me, but I would like to know, who would you like me to interview? Who would you like on the show? Who would you like to hear their thoughts from? So share that. Send me an email if you want, pastor@wordtab.net, or go ahead and comment right on the social media platform. And so as we wind up today's show, it's election season. And so let me remind you, number one, check your voter registration. Number two, you can do that by just Googling NC Voter Lookup. Number two, make sure it's active. Number 3, pull out your identification and make sure the identification card matches in terms of address and name. All the things match with what's on your voter registration, okay? Then I want you to have a voter plan. I want you to decide today the day that you're going to vote. Put it on your calendar. And then I want you to use your sphere of influence and 10 people that you have influence with. I want you to encourage them to vote. Even if you have to drive them yourself. So I want you to do that. It's going to make all the difference in the world. I'm James Gailliard. I'm out of time, but I'm not out of talk. I'm out of clock, but I'm not out of content. I'll be back with you next Monday at 5 p.m. on all the outlets here on Choice 92.1 FM. Pray you have a great day. As my mother always said to me, be strong, be kind. See you next week.